Hey there YouTube, AJ here, and today we're going to see if we can steer this 1927 Model T Touring hot rod into a new direction. Alright, so today what I'm trying to do is add one of the last major components into the chassis of my hot rod, and that would be steering. Yeah, my tie rod is on the front axle and the front wheels are tied together and will turn in unison together. However, I have nothing to make them turn other than pushing and pulling on the tires themselves. So what we need to do is add this steering box into the mix so we can eventually get this steering wheel onto that, so we can actually turn this car a little easier and better and get it moving down the road. But before we can do all that, there's a lot of figuring and thinking to do on where this thing actually has to go. Now unfortunately we can't just throw this in here even in its old stock position and expect things to work. We got a lot of complications going on. One of those complications is this much bigger V8 motor than the 4-cylinder that used to be in this frame. The exhaust manifold is in the way of where the steering box used to sit. The original location on the steering box was right about here, which is right in the center port of that exhaust, and the steering box would have sat right here and the column run right up through that manifold up into the car. So this original location really isn't going to work for us. So we basically had to figure out somewhere between this point and where the body meets that we can actually mount a steering box in this frame. Now, front to back isn't our only consideration. We also have to worry about side to side in there because we have to leave room for our exhaust to come out of that motor. And in my case, it's going to be a header pipe that I have to make, and those header pipes are going to have to snake around the steering column and or box. So we got to worry about all that configuration together. There's also the fact that this frame kind of tapers a little bit, and you have to take into account the pitman arm, the drag link, where they sit, the range of motion they go through, as well as the angle of the drag link as compared to our radius rods, because you want that to be as parallel as possible. So this is going to go in here someplace through the frame. Even that by itself is not the end of that story. Back to the steering box, we have the column that's going to run up into the car, and inside the car we have to worry about the angle of that column, how up and down it is, how left to right it is to the driver's seat, you know, because you want it to come out center to the driver and in a comfortable position, angle and up and down wise, for steering comfort and efficiency. But wait, there's more. This steering rod itself isn't the only problem there. You're actually going to have some kind of steering column shroud to go around the steering rod, because you don't want this spinning greasy shaft inside the cab of your car uncovered. So you got to worry about that. Back to this pitman arm, we also need to think about the length of it, because if we can't put it in the stock location, it obviously is going to have to get longer, and we have to build in my opinion, some adjustability in order to be able to fine tune it once you get it close. That may not be all. I don't know yet. I've never done this before. I'm not an expert on this. So who knows what else I'm going to find along the way. Now fortunately for you, I have already done a lot of the thinking on this. I'm not going to put you through that. I tried to learn my lesson from the last time when I did the pedals, which by the way is something else we have to contend with our steering. We have our pedals right here where our steering needs to go through in the middle. Anyway, back to I learned my lesson on the pedals. I did a lot of my thinking forefront here, and that's what this blue tape is. Up here is roughly where the original steering box hole was. I did weld this frame up before I really thought this through, and it doesn't really matter because I can't really use this. If I was to use that location, our pitman arm would be in this area, and you can see that it would have interfered with the radius rod. Now that's not insurmountable. We could bend the pitman arm out and down so it clears the radius rod. Another thing we're going to have to do eventually is bend and lower this. And we also have to flip it over. The ball needs to be on the bottom. But so we have to flip this over, bend and lower it, and our drag link will connect right here. If we could use the stock location, we probably wouldn't need to modify the length of our drag link, but we would definitely have to modify the pitman arm itself in order to clear the radius rod. However, that location wouldn't work anyway because the steering box itself would be completely interfering with the center port of the exhaust and getting out to our header. So I started looking at moving it back, and that's with the different places here, or here, to hopefully put the steering box in between the two ports. But then our steering shaft would have been running up through here, and I would have had trouble dealing with this rear port. So I kind of ruled out these two locations. So then I started looking from the rear port, how close I could get to it, to how far back here I could go. And as we go further back, the less we have to modify the pitman arm for clearance of the radius rods, but the more we have to modify the drag length because it's getting longer and longer. So I just kind of have to accept now that I'm going to have to make a new drag link. And instead of modifying this one, I'm going to make a new one that is adjustable. The further back we move this way, the less we have to modify the pitman arm. If we get in this location, we may not need to modify the pitman arm at all. So that's good. As we do move further back though, and we have to worry about the range of the pitman arm travel, because we don't want to get into our radius rod mount here. So that's another factor we got to consider. Now I did start trying to mock all this up with this steering box still on the steering shaft. And as you can imagine, that's not exactly light. And trying to hold it in place inside the cab, figure out our angles, was very difficult. Another problem with trying to use the entire steering box shaft assembly was the sector shaft that the pitman arm mounts to comes out of the mounting flange here. This mounting flange goes on the inside of the frame, and this comes through the frame itself. So with this in place, I could never really get the steering box in the correct position to see how it fit against all the other things in the way. Fortunately for me, I did have another steering box that was completely frozen up, and I disassembled it, gutted it, took out the sector shaft, took out the steering shaft, and then just put the housing and the mounting flanges, all that back together. So now I have this empty box that I could put inside the frame to the mounting points and slide back and forth and see how the rest of the box interfered with my exhaust ports. I also had this adjustable aluminum shaft that was from an old weed eater that I salvaged some of the parts out of, and I could just stick it down into the hollowed out box, and I could figure out my angles and my length pretty easily for my column inside the car. Putting that in place, I could easily check my steering wheel location back and forth while trying the steering box in different locations to see which is going to work out the best. Fortunately for you, I already went through that whole process, and I've determined already where I'm going to put my steering box. And that turned out to be right about there. So we're going to be drilling an 1.1/8 hole here for the sector shaft to come out of, so we can locate our other two flange bolts, and that is going to be where our steering box lives. With that compromise with all these things, I will need to work a little. I will have tight clearances here to work out my exhaust pipe to my header, but I think there's enough room to make that work. I will need to make an adjustable longer drag link, but having a longer drag link will make it easier to keep it more parallel with my radius rods. It's far enough forward that the travel back of the pitman arm kind of tucks it into this pocket area of my radius rod mount, so it looks kind of cool, like it's made to work with that. So I like that. It also minimizes or eliminates my need to modify my pitman arm itself for clearance of the radius rods. I think I might have clearance as is without changing any of it. So decision made. We're going to put it there. On the inside of the car here, I've got the adjustable aluminum shaft adjusted to the length, and when I sit it in the center of the steering box and put my steering wheel roughly into position where it's going to be, it looks right in the car as far as how high up it is. It's not too up and down like that, or too low to where I can't slide under it. It's not too far back. It's going to be tight getting in and out, but it's not too far back that I can't get in and out of the car. Everything seems to look good there. So I think I'm ready to go and start doing the dirty work and actually installing a steering box. Okay, we're all charged up, so it's time to see what the new Harbor Freight 1/2-inch Hercules hammer drill can do. Oh. Well, now it certainly had enough torque to snap that bit the second it went through. Woo! It grabbed and that bit just snapped, and I wasn't really going it crazy with it. So now I gotta go fix that. I'll be right back. Okay, we got a new centering bit in the hole saw. Let's see if we can cut a hole now without breaking the centering bit. Alright, so we got our sector shaft hole drilled. Take some burrs off of it there and clean it up a bit. I guess we can go ahead and take all this tape off here. We shouldn't need it anymore, fingers crossed. So now we got to figure out where our holes for our flange are going to be. We know roughly they're going to be like here and here, but I need to get this repositioned in there again with it all set up with my mock-up steering column, etc., and get these marked from the inside, somehow transfer that to the outside. I don't know how I'm going to do this yet, so I'm kind of thinking out loud here. First thing first, I think we're going to need the sector shaft installed before we do that, so we can have that shaft coming out, sticking out over here. Okay, well, we got our mock-up box with the sector shaft added back in. This might be hard to get into position, actually. This is all going to be very fun. We might need it. Let's try coming from the bottom of this one. Oh boy, I didn't even think about this. This is probably why you put the steering in before you put the car around it. Maybe if we come in this way. Oh, there we go. Got it. All right, now rotate the box into position. All right. Problem number one. I don't think our hole is quite big enough. Oh, maybe. Oh, it is. It's against the frame rail. I thought it wasn't against the frame rail. I made this template earlier. Roughed out where the holes were going to be. I don't remember if this had a top and a bottom. Take a look at our column. See how it's looking. Okay, that looks about right. Oh man, this is going to be tough. How do I do this? Let's add a little more tape back to the situation. That'll give us some place to mark on. Now, in theory, I can feel where this hole is on the back side. And if I line that spot up on the wheel out here, those holes should be pretty close, at least there. But is it close enough? I mean, it feels pretty good. So let's take question is do I feel confident enough to at least drill one of these and see if it lines up? I'm feeling pretty confident of it. I'm going to go ahead and mark one of them, drill it, and see if I can put a bolt through it. Hopefully we'll hit it dead on. All right, time to see how accurate our guesses were. Well, it seems to have hit pretty much in the hole. It was an 1/8 inch pilot hole, so we're gonna go ahead and step it up to a 1/4 inch. I think I may be a little off, like towards the sector shaft, so the 3/8 one I might need to. I don't know how that's gonna work out, but we're committed now. All right, let's step this up to the final size, 3/8. All right, so I backed that shaft in, so hopefully I won't hit my flange with the drill bit. But here we go. Okay, so the battery died and it corrupted the last file it was working on, and I lost a bunch of footage, but I got my holes drilled. My measurements for the flange holes were spot on. Got them right the first try, so that's good. I've got the temporary hollowed out steering box with the sector shaft in it right now. I've got the pitman arm stuck on this sector shaft for now. It's pretty good. Obviously, it's because I moved back from the original mounting location, it's not long enough, so I've got to make a new drag link. As far as travel, the rear travel is fine. It goes back without hitting anything, but when I come forward, we do hit, before we get to full left lock, we're hitting the pitman arm on the radius rod. So we will need to bend this pitman arm out to where it's pretty much straight up and down, instead of, it's right now it kind of bends back in towards the car. So that's no big deal. We'll heat that up, straighten it up, bend it out a little bit, and we should be fine clearing there. So inside the car, we are coming up pretty much right between the pedals, so everything looks good there. If we put the steering shaft in the center of the box, put our steering wheel roughly where it's going to go. So this is pretty much perfect where I want the wheel. Very happy with the position, and then my brakes. Yeah, my long knees are going to be kind of it's going to be kind of hard to do the pedals a little bit, so I might have to consider maybe shortening the pedal arm, or maybe something so I got a little less bump in my knee on the steering wheel to get here. But I really don't want the steering wheel. I suppose I could come a little further up, but I don't want it much further up, maybe 2 inches at most further up. And we can determine that later. We don't have to determine that right now, because my steering shaft that's going to go in here anyway is already going to need to be shortened 8 to 10 inches, because otherwise it's going to be like up like this, and that's definitely a no-no. We don't want that. So we're going to be taking 8 to 10 inches out of that shaft anyway. So we can address that part of it when we get there. So I was going to do my drag link next, but I'm still waiting for parts and tools for that. I got stuff on order, so I decided to go ahead and tackle this steering arm, because this ball needs to be on the bottom, which means the whole arm's got to flip over, and I need to drop it down into this area here. Obviously I took the wheel off so I could take the nuts off for this. It's all loose right now, but I did make a template out of a piece of clothes hanger. What we're going to do is come in about right here, bend it down at roughly a 45-ish degree angle, maybe not quite. So we're going to heat and bend it here, bend it down, and then as close to the ball as possible, we'll bend it back flat, so the ball will be upside down kind of in this area here. Maybe I should check this before I start bending it to make that I have room to do that. So let's go ahead and stick it on upside down like so. Yeah, got to bend it down a little bit. Not going to be able to bend it down a lot, it doesn't look like, but even if we can just get it down the width of the ball, like down to that point, that'll help. We're not going to be able to bend it super low, but even getting this ball down another inch or inch and a half is going to help our drag link angle, so we want to go ahead and do that. If you noticed, but today's casualty was my scissors. I caught them on fire. Someday I'll learn to clear this off before I start up the torch, but it wasn't today. Got it all heated and bended. It looks pretty good with my template I made. It's dropping at a good 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches, I think. I think it'll fit in. I just gotta let it cool off enough that I can handle it and put it back onto the wheel and test fit everything. We'll see how it goes. Okay, so while that cools, this is the grease cup off the driver's side, and the nuts to get to that steering arm go on this way, and with this corner in here you can't even hardly use a wrench in there, let alone a socket, so it's really miserable to tighten and loosen those bolts. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out this corner, and hopefully that'll make it easier for me to get a socket in there, I hope, to where I can tighten those down a lot easier. We're going to hope that this makes putting the nuts on an awful lot easier. Hopefully we can get to them. I'm hoping with a socket so we can tighten stuff down and not have to fight it one tiny partial turn at a time. Hopefully this won't impede its function too much, but still maintain some functionality of keeping grease off the brakes. All right, let's see what we got. Come on. All right, what do I have that I can spread this with? This is still a little too tight. What we're going to try to do is put it over the vise here and open the jaws. All right, that's about more than twice then. Feels a little looser. Let me just go fit it and we'll see if it worked. All right, let's see if we got it spread wide enough there. There we go, yep. It's really tight. Of course, the perfect time to do all this is when you got all this breakable stuff in the way. And especially when you got this hose that for some reason you just refuse to snip off. Maybe. Looks like they both need to go about 1/8. I'm going to go ahead and start my nuts on here. Hopefully, if we're lucky, I'll be able to put the socket on there and tighten these down with the socket and just pull that on up in there. Having that open access hole definitely is helping. At least I can thread them most of the way on with my fingers, if nothing else. That's a big win alone. Oh yeah. Much more gooder. Oh, look at that. Oh yeah, mama. I am going to, when I take this all apart, I am going to rebuild my brakes and everything then. So those aren't completely tight, but it's good and solid enough for now. We are going to be close on room. Whew. I think it's going to be okay though. It's going to be close, but I think it's going to be okay. If it's not, I can still bend this up a little bit more and get what we need. I really would like to have a little more clearance in there. So we may have to bend this some more, but we'll wait until we get our drag link cut and fit, and we'll see how it all goes then. When we come back, we'll be doing that, I hope. I'm going to turn you guys off and I'm going to put this back together. So see you when I get the parts for my drag link. I forgot, there's one more thing I can do before I get my drag link parts. I do need to take my pitman arm and see how it's kind of fades back into the car body. We need to take and bend this out that way because this is hitting my radius rod. So we need to get this more straight. Alright, somewhere I have like a big screwdriver socket bit for this thing. But we're going to make do with an old Gambrinus church key. And we got her moving without bending up my old vintage church key, so that'll work for now. Now, ta-da! One pretty good shaped pitman arm. So we don't need that anymore because we're going to be making a new drag link out of another tie rod, because we're going to need it to be longer than that one, and it's easier to cut another tie rod down and we'll be able to adjust it. So in the long run, I think that's the way to go. Let's throw this in the vise and throw some heat on it. Well, I'm back. I don't have the parts yet. However, I decided to come out this morning and throw my drag link that's too short onto my steering arm and check the clearances. And well, good thing I did, because I screwed the pooch. So here's what we got. I have too much clearance here, so I need to heat this up and bend this back a little closer to the radius rod, because okay, so with the drag link in place and roughly aimed at where my pitman arm travel is going to be, if I go to turn left and it pushes all the way far out, my tire hits my drag link before I get full lock to lock. So that's bad. Part of what's causing that problem is this point here isn't far enough out. It's too close in, and when I bent this down and over, I basically shortened this by a ½ inch, so I can gain a ½ inch by straightening this back out, but then I'm going to have a more severe drag link angle. However, that's not all of our problem. If we pull back on the drag link like we're turning right, I am going to hit my tie rod on my axle before I get all the way to the right. Again, my drop and the shortness of this arm has got me back into this area. So me thinking I had this all figured out and did the bend, the drop, threw it in there, I screwed up. I should have, before I bent and dropped this, I should have test fit this with my ball pointed down. Should have flipped it, put it in, put the ball down, test fit it, and see where we could have went from there. So now what I got to do is take all this back off again, and then heat this up, bend this back up, and straighten this out as much as possible. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. Delivery driver's bumping out there, man. Anyway, I don't know if I'm going to be able to put any drop in it at all. So what I'm going to try to do is take this all off, heat this up, and I'm going to bend it to where it's mostly flat again, but maybe just a little bit of drop. Since I got to go back that ways anyway, might as well like try it at some point where I still have a little bit of drop from it. I don't know if that's going to make a difference or not at this point. I got a gut feeling this just may be too short in general. Straighten it out and try it again. I won't make you watch all that since it's pretty much going to be the exact same thing I just did yesterday. I'll meet you all back here once I'm test fitting. All right, so we are at full left lock now with my new undropped. I mean, it's a little drop, maybe a 1/4 inch, not much, but it's mostly undropped now upper steering arm. Obviously that's going to make my drag link angle worse, but you know, it's going to have to be what it is for now. If it's a problem, we'll have to address it later. But at all the way left lock, putting this drag link roughly where it would be in line with the pitman arm. And if we mark out where the tire is going to be, we're definitely not going to get full lock out of it. We're going to hit. Ultimately, we really could use a longer steering arm and a longer one that had a little drop in it. Maybe I'll need to change this later, but we'll worry about that later. I'm going to run with this the way it is now. It does clear this way. If we turn all the way, as if we were going to turn to all the way to the right, we can get full right lock out of it without anything hitting. So that part's all good. So we can only make sharp right turns, no sharp left turns. So I think I'm just going to put it back together this way, continue getting our steering set up using this arm in its new configuration. Alright, so I got another tie rod here. I've got one end already on place on the upper control arm. I have left a 1/2 inch of threads exposed on this end, and I'll do the same once I cut and shorten this end. That will allow me to lengthen or shorten my overall drag link by 1 inch when I'm done. So, you know, hopefully I won't need that much adjustment, but just in case, I'll have it there. So if we take our other tie rod end, kind of mock it up into position here, mark where we want the end of the tie rod end to be. So our total length of threads we need on there is 2 inches, but a 1/2 inch of that's going to exceed past here. So basically, I'm going to put a mark. So basically we're going to cut it here and thread it all the way down to there. Does that make sense? And then when we put this end on, we'll only thread it to that point there, and that'll be our starting point. And then we can adjust it from there. Almost cut that measured and cut it the wrong way. Alright. Mark that there. And before we commit to the cut, I'm going to run over real quick and just double check this length. Alright, well, I was expecting that to be solid, not a tube. And I thought that because the threaded end was solid, but I guess not. I guess it was only solid at the end part of it. I'm going to go ahead, it shouldn't matter. I mean, it's still plenty to thread onto. It'll be fine. So I did cut it just a smidge long, and I'm going to file a slight taper on the edge of it. And hopefully that'll make it easier for my tap to bite in, or not my tap, my die, for my die to bite in and start threading the tie rod. So my die doesn't fit the die handle I have, so I've got a piece of steel wedged in here. We're going to give it a shot anyway, see if we can get it to cut some threads on here. Come on. Well, we're cutting threads of some sort on here. Whether or not they're straight, I don't know. Let's hope they are. Well, keep our fingers crossed. So far, it's going better than I expected. I will probably tap this in a little longer than I need it, just in case I need to doctor it up a little bit, but not by much, maybe like a 1/4 inch at most. So like go to 2 1/4 inches of threads. We're at a little over 1 1/2 now, almost to 2. All right, we are at 2 1/4. Okay, as you can see, my rod is hollow, but it's threaded. Let's if anybody knows if that makes a difference, if I need to do something like weld a plug in there or something, comment below, let me know. I don't think it'll be a big deal, but you never know. Meanwhile, my threads are working, so that's good. Okay, so we got our back end on the tie rod end for the pitman arm in place. I did thread my rod a lot further than I meant to, about the thickness of the die basically, because what I did was when I was measuring to the trailing edge of the die, not the leading edge. So the thickness of the die is how much further I went that I didn't want to go, but it doesn't hurt it, so it's okay. Now we just gotta get the front one back together, thread it in, and these fine threads take forever. We'll go ahead and try to pop the tie rod in on down here because it's in position. There we go. Now, tighten that down. All right, so we now have pitman arm onto the linkage, drag link up to our upper steering arm. Everything feels pretty sturdy, so I think it's going to be okay. Turn the wheels to the left. We do have some interference on the tire here before we get to full lock. It's not too bad. A slightly longer upper steering arm may help that, may get a little bit more. We go back the other way. We have absolutely no issues going the other way. We are not completely parallel here. If I ever go to make another upper control arm, I'll make it a little longer and a little more drop in it. That'll help. But I'm going to run it like this for now and see if it causes any problems. Obviously, the biggest problem now is on the left turn. I can't go full lock because I'm hitting here. I knew that going into that. Right turn's no problem though. So if we got to turn, if we got to make a tight turn, we'll make it to the right. U-turn's going to be tough. Okay. We got linkage. All right, so let's recap what we've done. Honestly, I don't even know how long it's been. I've been traveling a lot for work, so I just keep doing stuff here and there when I can. So what we've done, we've removed our upper steering arm, flipped it over so the ball's on the bottom. We bent and lowered it, but then we had interference issues, so we had to unbend and lower it. So it's only slightly lowered now. If I get a longer one, we can lower it, move it over to this area and down. That'll help on our rubbing area here with the tire. It is what it is at this point. We've taken another tie rod, made an adjustable drag link out of it using the original Model A tie rod ends. We've got our Gimmer steering box installed but gutted, and our pitman arm on. Our linkage pretty much clears. Again, slight rub on the tire. We are not completely parallel, obviously, with our radius rod, but I don't think we're too bad. We're going to try it as is, and if we need to fix, we can adjust later. With that said, in here, we figured out roughly where our steering wheel is going to be and at roughly what height it'll be. Unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to end this video. 1, to get a video out, and 2, this is getting long, and 3, next video, I'm going to be rebuilding the steering box. and putting the column back in it. And I figure that's going to be kind of a more in-depth video, more of a how-to, more of a, I don't know if it's going to be a how-to, but it's going to be more of a, you know, show you the guts and parts that like maybe it'll actually help someone else rebuild it. We're getting closer to getting steering to where we can actually move a steering wheel in this thing. That'd be nice. But thank you for watching. Follow along, there's likes, comments. Believe it or not, every time I get even one new subscriber pops up and my number goes up by 1, it makes me feel good and it gives me a little more incentive to keep moving. So keep those subscribes coming. Next time we'll be rebuilding this steering box. So until then, YouTube, later.